So we are heading into late August 2026, and it's that time of year, right?
Yeah.
Summer is basically wrapping up, and families are getting settled for the new school year. The whole real estate market is kind of taking this collective breath right now before the fall season really kicks off.
It always slows down a bit right around now.
Right, exactly. But the data that's coming out specifically for Montague County, Texas, is just wild.
Oh, it's fascinating.
It really is. So our mission for this deep dive today is to basically cut through all the noise. We're looking at the latest North Texas Real Estate Information Systems figures. So the in-trade numbers, we have the Q1 and March baselines, and then this really specific July 2026 deep dive report on Montague County.
Yeah, and that July data is where things get really interesting.
Exactly. Plus, we're blending all that macro data with some ground-level intel from local broker marketing profiles, specifically David Peet of Peet Realty out in Alvord, Texas.
Right.
He's been navigating this specific terrain for over 12 years. And, reading all this current real estate data, it kind of reminds me of, do you remember those Magic Eye posters from the 90s?
Oh, yeah, the ones you had to, cross your eyes to see.
Yeah. You stare at it, and at first glance, it's just this chaotic jumble of numbers and neon shapes. It makes no sense.
Right, it just looks like noise.
Exactly.
No.
But if you look at it the right way, if you sort of relax your eyes, suddenly this very clear 3D picture emerges. And that's what we have here, a very clear picture of human behavior if you know how to read it.
I love that analogy because it really is about human behavior. You are taught in basic economics that, if demand rises and supply falls, prices must go up.
Right, that's just basic math.
Exactly. But real estate isn't happening on a chalkboard. It happens in actual neighborhoods with actual people. So when you see the July data for Montague County, where sales jumped 50% year over year, but active inventory shrank, and yet the median home price crashed by over 7%.
Which is just a mathematical impossibility, right?
Yeah. All right, it looks like a typo in the report. But when you dig into the mechanics of the specific market, that broken equation actually makes perfect logical sense.
Okay, well, since you're always studying how macro trends impact these micro markets, I knew this data set was a perfect case study for you. So where do we start? Because we have to build out the context first, right?
Yeah, we definitely do. Because before we can understand the weird things happening on those county roads in Montague, we first have to look at the macroeconomic weather system that's just sitting over the entire country right now.
The interest rate.
Exactly. The dominant force acting on every single local market right now is this severe case of financial hesitation. And it's largely driven by the cost of capital.
Yeah. So looking at the sources, as of mid-August, the 30-year conventional fixed-rate mortgage is hovering right at 6.63%. But with the annual percentage rate factored in, you're actually looking at a 6.8% APR. And even if a buyer looks at a 15-year conventional state, they are still staring at a flat 6%.
Yeah, and those numbers dictate literally everything that follows. Because you'll see a lot of buyers gravitating toward FHA loans right now.
Right, because the advertised rate looks a lot softer.
Exactly. The advertised rate for FHA is around 6.25%, but it's a mirage.
Wait, why is it a mirage?
Because once you calculate the mandatory mortgage insurance premiums that are required for an FHA product, the effective APR gets pushed all the way up to 6.97%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you are functionally borrowing at 7% regardless of the vehicle you choose. There's no real escape hatch for buyers right now.
That's brutal. So you combine that almost 7% borrowing cost with the broader geopolitical landscape that's affecting consumer confidence right now. The sources specifically highlight that ongoing unrest in the Middle East is creating this measurable drag on domestic consumer certainty. And just strictly from an economic behavior standpoint, when global stability feels shaky and your domestic borrowing costs are knocking on 7%, taking on a 30-year debt obligation, just feels incredibly daunting for the average person.
It absolutely does. We are seeing a complete paralysis in buyer psychology.
Yeah.
And that hesitation shows up so clearly in the baseline NTRICE numbers we saw earlier this year across the broader North Texas region.
Right, the Q1 and March data.
Yeah. We watched new listings and total inventory shrink by roughly 2.4 to 2.8%, while at the same time, median sales prices softened by about 4%, settling around $360,000 regionally.
So less supply, but also falling prices across the whole region.
Exactly. And this brings up a concept we hear about all the time right now, which is the locked-in effect.
Oh, yeah, the golden handcuffs?
Yes. People who secured a 3% mortgage back in 2020 or 2021, the theory is that they simply refused to sell because upgrading their home means doubling their interest rate and just slashing their purchasing power.
Right. But I have to challenge you on that a little bit, or at least challenge how absolute that paralysis really is.
Okay, go for it.
Because, I mean, people still get divorced.
True.
People still have kids. People still lose jobs or they get relocated for work across the country. Life events don't care about a 6.8% APR.
Yeah.
Aren't those unavoidable life triggers enough to keep the inventory moving? At least a little bit.
You're totally right. They absolutely keep the market functioning at a baseline level. But the threshold for triggering a move has fundamentally shifted.
What do you mean the threshold shifted?
Well, think about it this way. 5 years ago, a family having their third child might immediately say, okay, we need to list our 3-bedroom house and buy a 4-bedroom. It was a no-brainer. Today, that exact same family has their third child. They do the math on a 7% mortgage, and they decide to convert their garage instead. Or finish their attic. The life events are still happening, sure, but consumers are finding alternatives to moving.
I see. So they just remodel.
Exactly. They put bunk beds in, they make it work. So the only people selling right now are the ones who have 0 other options. Death, divorce, and drastic job relocation. That's about it.
Which creates a massive backlog of delayed transactions. It's like a coiled spring.
Yes, it's exactly like a coiled spring. And this is where buyers can really easily miscalculate. A lot of sideline buyers are telling themselves that they are just going to wait for rates to drop back into the 5s before they purchase.
I hear that all the time. People saying, I'll just wait it out.
Right. But if you wait for the capital to get cheaper, you are going to be walking into the market at the exact same moment as thousands of other buyers who had the exact same strategy.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The dam is just going to break. Bidding wars, return inventory gets wiped out in a weekend, and the premium you end up paying on the purchase price completely vaporizes whatever savings you thought you were getting from the lower interest rate.
That makes so much sense. If everyone is waiting to buy, then when rates drop, the demand spikes so hard that the home prices just shoot to the moon.
Exactly. You trade a high interest rate for a ridiculously high purchase price.
So let's apply that macro friction directly to our target market for this deep dive. Let's look at Montague County.
Yes, let's zoom in.
Because when we look at Montague in July 2026, we see this crazy localized surge. 24 single-family homes closed in July, which is that 50% year-over-year jump I mentioned in the intro.
50% is a huge jump.
And it wasn't just a July anomaly either. The year-to-date figures show the county has closed 149 homes, which is up 42%. So buyers are definitely buying. The spring is uncoiling a little bit there.
They are buying, yes. But here's the paradox. The fresh supply is drying up at the same time. New listings fell 23% in July.
Wow, 23%.
Yeah, only 34 properties actually came to the market. The total active inventory for the county shrank by over 10%, leaving just 204 units available total.
Okay, so sales are up massively and supply is shrinking.
Exactly. And the pacing metric we use for this, the months of supply dropped from a sluggish 14.5 months down to just under 10 months.
Let's pause on that 10-month supply figure for a second. Because technically, in real estate economics, anything over 6 months of inventory favors the buyer rate. It's a buyer's market.
Right. 6 months is sort of the equilibrium point.
But because that number is falling so rapidly from 14.5 down to 10, the negotiating power seems to be shifting in real time.
It's definitely a market in transition. Which brings us back to your opening magic eye puzzle.
Right. Sales are up, supply is tightening, but the median sales price in Montague County dropped 7.3% to $234,000. Sellers are having to come down. They're only getting about 91.8% of their original list price.
Yeah.
So how is the median price falling when buyers are clearly active and inventory is shrinking? Explain this to me.
So we have to look at the timeline of a transaction. The days on market for Montague County jumped to 109 days in July.
109 days. So like over 3 months.
Over 3 months just sitting there. And although the year-to-date is a little better at 89 days, it's still a very slow market. Sellers are realizing that to move a property in this higher rate environment, they have to capitulate on price. They just have to.
Right.
They aren't getting into bidding wars anymore. Like you said, the data shows they are walking away with under 92% of their asking price.
They're taking basically an 8% haircut just to get the deal across the finish line.
Exactly. Because think about the psychology of a seller After a property sits for 100 days, the holding costs are adding up. You've got taxes, insurance, maintenance.
And keeping the yard mowed.
Yes, keeping it mowed, keeping it show-ready constantly. You have to leave the house every time someone wants to look at it. The psychological fatigue of that starts to outweigh their desire to hold firm on their asking price.
Ah, I see. So the buyers basically have the leverage of time.
Yes, the buyer isn't in a rush, so the seller eventually blinks. But the data throws one more really weird curveball here that we have to talk about.
Okay, what is it?
The median dropped to $234,000, right? But the average sales price skyrocketed 16% to over $375,000.
Wait, the median drops 7%, but the average spikes 16%.
Yes.
Okay, since we know the listeners of this deep dive already understand the statistical difference between mean and median, we don't have to do a whole math lesson. But I want to use an analogy here just to ground this in reality.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's kind of like a local diner. Imagine you have a diner where everyone who walks in orders a $10 burger. So the median bill, the dead middle of the market, is $10. It's affordable. But then one guy walks in, sits in the back booth, and orders a $500 bottle of vintage wine.
Right.
If you calculate the average bill for the diner that night, it might look like $50. But that $50 average doesn't reflect the everyday experience of the people eating there.
Yeah.
The everyday experience is a $10 burger.
That is a perfect analogy. That's exactly what is happening in Montague County. It is the defining characteristic of a smaller, rural, adjacent market.
Right, because it's not Dallas. The volume is lower.
Exactly. When you have a much lower volume of overall transactions, it only takes 2 or 3 massive, expensive legacy properties changing hands to pull that average up by 16%.
The guy buying the extensive wine.
Right. Meanwhile, the median, that $234,000 mark, is the honest indicator of what a standard 3-bed, 2-bath family home is actually trading for. The standard suburban home is losing value, softening up, while the ultra-luxury stuff skews the math.
Which is such a crucial distinction. For anyone trying to actually buy a normal house there, you hear prices are up 16% and you panic, but it's just the luxury properties doing that.
Exactly. You have to look at the median. Always look at the median.
This neatly transitions into the second half of the Entry S report, because if you know anything about Montague County, you know it isn't just subdivisions and city limits.
Not at all.
No, its whole identity is tied to agriculture, wide open spaces, and rural acreage. And the data for the farm and ranch sector operates under a completely different gravitational pull than the residential side.
It really does. The contrast is just stark. For July 2026, the MLS recorded 0 sales classified strictly as farm.
0.
0. However, under the broader land category, which is what captures the ranchettes and the large acreage parcels, there were 9 transactions.
Okay, 9 sales, which doesn't sound like a lot of volume.
It's not. But the financial weight of those 9 transactions is immense. The average price for those land sales was nearly $1.9 million.
$1.9 million.
Yes. That is an 1,100% jump from the previous year.
What? 1,100%?
Yes. And even the median land price hit $465,000, which is up 280%.
Okay, we have to unpack those percentage jumps very carefully because of what you just said about the tiny sample size.
Right. You only need one sprawling multi-million-dollar ranch to close to send a 9-sale sample size into the stratosphere.
It's the diner analogy on steroids.
Exactly. It doesn't mean every acre of dirt in the county is suddenly worth 1,100% more than it was last July. But it does signal a very real trend. There is a heavy influx of well-capitalized buyers who are targeting very specific rural lifestyles.
And this is where David Peet's local intelligence becomes so valuable. You're looking at his profiles from Peet Realty. He's been out there in Alvord for over a decade. And you realize people don't spend $2 million just to own dirt.
No, they don't.
They are buying access to an ecosystem. Peet's marketing profiles highlight these amazing local details. He talks about buyers running British white cattle. He details properties that are set up specifically for retired Tennessee Walker horses so they can spend their final years riding the North Texas LBJ Grasslands trail system.
Yeah, it's agrarian romance. That's what it is.
Agrarian romance. I like that.
It's true. These buyers are looking for a tangible disconnect from the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. They don't just want a big yard. They're purchasing the infrastructure to support highly specific agricultural hobbies.
Right.
The fencing, the barns, the water access.
But there is a massive catch here for anyone who is trying to sell into this romance right now.
The inventory.
Yes, the inventory metric for land in Montague County is sitting at over 25 months of supply.
Yeah, it's staggering.
That is more than 2 years' worth of dirt, just sitting there waiting for a buyer. I mean, if you're a seller with 50 acres, how do you even strategize against a 25-month backlog? Doesn't that make raw land fundamentally an illiquid asset at this point?
Well, it requires an entirely different liquidity expectation from the seller.
What does that mean?
It means you can't treat it like a house. Selling a standard single-family home in a subdivision is somewhat comparable to trading a blue-chip stock. There is a known active market of buyers looking for 3 bedrooms in a good school district. You price it right, it sells.
Right.
But selling a 50-acre property bordering the LBJ Grasslands with custom equine facilities, that is like selling a rare piece of art.
Oh, okay, because the buyer pool is so incredibly niche.
Exactly. You aren't marketing to the general public anymore. You are waiting for a specific collector.
The specific person who wants to retire their Tennessee Walker horse.
Right. And you cannot artificially rush that collector into the market. A buyer who specifically wants the infrastructure for British white cattle will pay a premium when they are finally ready to buy. But dropping your price by $20,000 next week isn't going to magically conjure that buyer out of thin air.
Right, because if the buyer isn't there, a discount doesn't create them. They either want the horse farm or they don't.
Exactly. For sellers of these ranchettes, strategy means pricing the asset strictly on comparable utility. You have to completely ignore the emotional weight of your custom improvements, and you have to exercise extreme patience. You just have to let the market's natural slow pacing do the work for you.
Which has to be so agonizing if you actually need the money, just waiting 2 years.
Oh, it is. It's incredibly stressful.
So let's try to synthesize all of this into an actionable playbook for the listener. Because if someone is listening to this deep dive, tracking this data to find strategic leverage for their own life, the current environment actually offers very distinct opportunities depending on which side of the closing table you sit on, right?
It really does. There are moves to be made. Let's look at the buyer's position first.
Yeah.
A 10-month supply of standard homes paired with a median price that's trending downward to that $234,000 mark gives a buyer a profound operational advantage.
Even with the high rates.
Yes. Mortgage rates are high, sure, but they are remarkably stable right now in the mid-sixes. We aren't seeing the violent weekly rate swings of previous years where it jumps a whole point in a month.
Right, the stability is key there.
Exactly. That stability gives you the runway to actually negotiate.
Because if homes are sitting for over 100 days and the sellers are already conditioned to accept an 8% reduction from their list, price buyers have the leverage to ask for things that were literally unthinkable 2 years ago.
Unthinkable. 2 years ago, you were waiving inspections and offering $50,000 over asking. Now you can structure the deal to your advantage.
So how should a buyer structure it today?
Well, instead of just grinding the seller down on the purchase price, a smart buyer in this transition market uses that leverage to ask for financing concessions.
Like a buy down.
Yes, exactly. You ask for a 2-1 interest rate buy down, paid for by the seller, or you ask for significant concessions for closing costs and deferred maintenance. You essentially use the seller's fatigue to make your expensive money slightly cheaper.
That is such a great strategy. Don't just argue over the sticker price. Use their desperation to buy down your 7% rate.
Right, because over 30 years, that rate buy down saves you way more than $5,000 off the top.
Conversely, though, if you are analyzing the seller's playbook right now, the data is just totally unforgiving.
It is brutal for sellers who don't pay attention to the math.
Yeah, because if you list your property with an aspirational, let's just test the market price, you're going to get punished.
The market will simply ignore you. Your listing will sit, the days on market will tick past 100 and then 120. And buyers will immediately assume there is something structurally wrong with the home, or they'll just assume you are desperate.
And then the lowball offers come in.
Right? You will ultimately sell for less than if you had priced it at the harsh median reality from day one. You have to be realistic right out of the gate.
But the sources also point out a really pragmatic strategy for potential sellers who feel stuck in that locked-in paralysis we were talking about earlier.
Right, the ones waiting for rates to drop.
Yeah. If you are holding off on listing because you want to wait for rates to soften and buyer demand to surge, the advice is that you should be using this late August lull right now to aggressively prep your property.
Oh, absolutely. That is the best advice you could give a seller right now.
Because when the cost of borrowing eventually drops, The resulting surge in buyer activity will be incredibly fast and aggressive. The dam breaking.
Yep. The properties that successfully capture that initial wave of new capital will be the ones that are pristine, professionally staged, and totally free of any deferred maintenance.
Right. Because if you wait for the rates to drop to start painting your kitchen cabinets, you've already missed the optimal window. By the time the paint is dry, the market might have already shifted again, or you've missed the initial frenzy.
Exactly. You have to be ready to go live the minute the market sentiment turns.
Which really leaves us looking at Montague County as this fascinating microcosm of real estate mechanics. We see a market that is definitely regaining transaction volume, right? The sales are up 50%, but it's operating in a much healthier, negotiation-heavy reality.
It is. It's shedding the frantic, emotional bidding wars of the pandemic era and returning to a much more math-based housing market, which is good for everyone long-term.
I agree. It is healthier. But building on all this data, I want to leave the listener with a slightly different angle to analyze before we wrap up.
Lay it on us.
So we noted that there is a 25-month backlog of rural land inventory, right? This massive buffer that is keeping the pace of development out there incredibly slow.
2 years of dirt just sitting there.
Right. But we also know there is a massive pent-up demand of buyers sitting on the sidelines in Dallas and Fort Worth, waiting for borrowing costs to drop.
The coiled spring.
Yeah, exactly, the coiled spring.
Yeah.
So my question is, if mortgage rates finally do fall back into the fives and the financial barrier lifts for thousands of remote workers in the neighboring DFW Metroplex, what happens to those 25 months of land inventory?
Oh, wow.
Right. Does a sudden injection of cheap capital cause that entire 2-year supply to get bought up, subdivided, and developed in a matter of months?
That is a terrifying thought for the locals. It really threatens the fundamental identity of the whole area.
It does. It makes you wonder if the character of the LBJ Grasslands, the cattle ranches, and those specialized equestrian trails can actually survive a sudden rate-driven influx of suburban sprawl.
Yeah, if the money gets cheap, the developers come knocking.
Exactly. So in a strange way, this current macroeconomic hesitation, the high rates, the cautious buyers, the 100-day listings, it might actually be acting as a protective financial bubble right now, preserving the agricultural culture of Montague County from rapid development for just a little bit longer.
That is such an interesting perspective. It suggests that market friction isn't always a negative force. Sometimes it's a necessary preservative for local culture.
Exactly. It's just an angle worth modeling as you continue tracking these trends. Well, we hope this breakdown of the Entres data and the local market mechanics gave you the insight you need. Thanks for diving into the numbers with us today, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep looking past the noise.